The morning sun spread a soft golden light across Maple Grove Valley, a place where every lawn was trimmed perfectly, every mailbox painted white, and every rule followed like scripture. The HOA president, Karen Dalton, loved that control more than anything. She was proud of her spotless community, the flowers, the fences, the sameness that made her feel powerful. But that morning, a single for sale sign on the far edge of her kingdom caught her attention. Beyond that sign was a property she never cared about before, a small two-story house sitting just outside the HOA boundary. To most people, it was nothing special, but to Karen, it was trouble waiting to happen, because that house was technically outside her reach. When Adam Cooper pulled into the driveway with his pickup truck and a quiet smile, she was already watching from across the street, her eyes narrow, her arms crossed. Adam was the opposite of her kind, calm, simple, private. A man who liked his peace and didn't care for rules written by anyone else. He had spent years saving up for this moment, a place where he could live without hearing, "You can't do that," or "You need approval." The realtor had shown him the map twice, pointing to the red HOA line running through the corner of the valley. "This house, Mr. Cooper, is just beyond it," the realtor said. "No dues, no inspections, no board. You're free here." Adam smiled, shaking his hand. "That's exactly what I'm looking for." He moved in a week later. His house was small but peaceful, tall trees behind it, a quiet road in front, and the faint sound of wind through the pine leaves. He spent his first day unpacking, planting flowers near the porch, and hanging a small wooden sign that read "Welcome Home." To him, it was perfect. But across the street, Karen stood beside her perfect rose bushes, staring. Every time Adam carried another box inside, she made a note in her little HOA journal: unapproved mailbox, no visible address number, garden not in HOA design standard. The problem was simple. She couldn't stand what she couldn't control. That night, as the sun went down and Adam turned on his porch light, Karen whispered to herself, "That's still part of our community whether he likes it or not." The next morning, Adam woke early, made coffee, and decided to install a new mailbox. Black metal, classic, nothing fancy. He dug a hole near the edge of his property, humming as he worked, the sound of birds blending with the rhythm of his shovel. It was peaceful until he heard the sharp sound of footsteps and a voice that cut through the calm like a knife. "Excuse me." Adam looked up to see Karen marching across the road, her HOA badge clipped neatly to her blazer, her smile tight and forced. "What do you think you're doing?" she demanded. Adam wiped his hands and said, "Just putting up my new mailbox." She frowned. "That's not an approved design. The HOA requires all mailboxes to be white, decorative, and uniform. You'll have to remove that." Adam looked confused for a second, then said, "I think there's a misunderstanding. My house isn't under your HOA." Her smile froze, her eyes narrowing. "Of course it is," she said. "This whole area is part of Maple Grove." Adam pulled out the folded paper from his pocket, the property deed and county map he'd gotten from the realtor. "I'm just beyond your boundary line," he said politely. "See this red mark here? That's where your rules stop." For a moment, Karen said nothing. Her face twitched slightly as she studied the map, her eyes darting between the paper and his yard. She hated being wrong. "Well," she said finally, "even if that's true, this still affects the look of our community. I have to enforce neighborhood standards." Adam smiled faintly, his tone calm. "I respect your rules, but you don't have authority here. Have a good day." He went back to digging. The sound of the shovel striking the dirt seemed to echo louder with every hit, each one chipping away at her control. Karen's jaw tightened. "You can't just ignore the rules," she shouted. Adam looked at her again, his eyes steady. "You have no say here. I'm not under your HOA." Those words hit her like thunder. The color drained from her face, replaced by a cold, stiff fury. She stood there frozen for a second, then turned sharply and walked back toward her house, her heels clicking angrily on the pavement. As she crossed the road, she muttered under her breath, "We'll see about that." That night, while Adam relaxed on his porch watching the stars, A car drove slowly past his house, a black SUV with tinted windows. It paused for a few seconds near his driveway before driving off. He didn't think much of it, but across the street, behind the curtain of her living room, Karen watched the car's taillights disappear and whispered, "No one moves into my neighborhood and ignores me." The next morning, Adam found a folded piece of paper stuck to his front door. It was printed with HOA letterhead and bold text, "Notice of non-compliance, unauthorized structure." He laughed softly, shaking his head. "She's really trying," he muttered. He picked up the paper, crumpled it, and tossed it in the trash. Then he went back to work, painting his fence white, trimming the hedges, minding his own business. But by evening, he noticed something strange. 2 women from the HOA board were walking along the sidewalk with clipboards, stopping in front of his house to take photos. When he stepped outside, they quickly looked away and hurried down the street. That night, Adam's phone buzzed with a message from his neighbor, an older man named Jim. It read, "Hey, just so you know, Karen's talking about you at tonight's HOA meeting. She says you're violating property rules." Adam chuckled, replying, "Let her talk. I'm not under her rules." But deep down, he knew Karen wasn't the kind to stop easily. For someone like her, control wasn't a rule, it was an addiction. By the end of the week, things began to change. People who once smiled at Adam now looked uneasy. A few neighbors avoided eye contact, while others whispered when he passed. Karen's influence was spreading again, twisting the truth like she always did. One evening, as Adam was cleaning his porch, she appeared again, arms crossed, that same fake smile plastered on her face. "Mr. Cooper," she said sweetly, "I wanted to let you know the HOA board voted to include your property under our protection policy. You'll be receiving your first fee notice soon." Adam stared at her, incredulous. "You can't do that. My house isn't part of your HOA." She shrugged, "You can dispute it later if you like, but until then, you'll be expected to comply." Her tone was smug, like someone who believed she'd already won. Adam said nothing. He simply nodded once, turned around, and walked into his house. But behind that calm, a plan was forming. He pulled out his deed again, checked the county's online registry, and smiled when he saw the confirmation. His property, officially marked outside HOA limits, verified by the county clerk. He printed the page and placed it on his table beside his morning coffee cup. "She wants a war," he murmured. "Let's give her one." That night, the rain began to fall softly, tapping against the windows, the quiet rhythm filling the house. Across the street, Karen sat by her computer, typing an email to the HOA board. "Resident Adam Cooper continues to violate design standards and refuses to acknowledge HOA authority. Recommend immediate fine and legal action." She clicked send, leaned back, and smiled to herself, convinced that victory was just a meeting away. But she didn't know the storm she had started, not the rain outside, but the one coming straight for her pride, her title, and the false empire she built on fear. And it all began because of a single sentence spoken by a man who just wanted peace. "You have no say here." The days after that rainy night were calm on the surface but carried an unease underneath, the kind of silence that comes before a storm. Adam went about his days quietly, repairing the porch, planting new flowers, and taking long walks along the edge of the property line. Yet he could feel eyes watching him from across the road. Karen's curtains moved just slightly whenever he stepped outside, and the hum of gossip began to spread through Maple Grove like smoke from a slow fire. The neighbors, who once smiled at him, now looked away, their voices hushed, and every time he passed, he could feel the weight of judgment pressing against him. It didn't bother him at first, but then small things began to happen. One morning, he found a stack of flyers stuck under his mailbox, each one printed with bold letters, "Protect our community. Stop unregulated construction." The flyers accused him of breaking zoning laws, of ruining neighborhood harmony, and even suggested that he was a safety risk to children. Adam stared at the papers, his jaw tightening. He looked around and saw Karen's perfect roses blooming across the street, and for the first time, he saw what was really happening. She was using her favorite weapon, fear. She couldn't control him directly, so she'd poison everyone else against him, turning the neighborhood into her army. That afternoon, he decided to test something. He set up a small security camera above his front door and one facing the property line. Not because he was afraid, but because he knew how far people like Karen could go when pride turned to obsession. The next morning, he woke to the sound of a car engine idling outside. He peeked through the window and saw a white SUV stopped right at the line dividing his property from the HOA's. Two people inside held cameras, snapping photos of his house. He stepped out calmly and waved. The car drove off fast, tires crunching over gravel. An hour later, he got an envelope in his mailbox marked HOA notice. He opened it slowly, reading the words carefully, unauthorized modification of structure. Fine. $250. He laughed under his breath, shaking his head. They're losing their minds, he whispered, but the smile faded when he noticed something strange at the bottom of the letter. A handwritten note in neat cursive. You can't hide behind that line forever. That night, the valley was quiet, the street lamps glowing faintly in the mist. Adam sat by his window, sipping coffee, watching the road, his mind calm but alert, across the street. He saw the flicker of light through Karen's blinds and the shadow of her pacing back and forth, on her desk. Her phone buzzed with messages from the HOA board, some supporting her, others warning her to stop pushing, but she ignored them. Her pride had become an anchor dragging her deeper. She muttered to herself. He thinks he's free because of a line on paper, but that land belongs to Maple Grove. Her eyes moved to the large binder labeled HOA jurisdiction files. She flipped it open, scanning for old maps, boundaries, anything she could twist, and then she found it. A decades-old community plan from before the current county redraw. The old border placed her side just a few feet past where Adam's fence now stood. She smiled, her lips curling. Got you. She whispered, not caring that the file was outdated and void. She just needed something, anything, to claim power again. The next morning, Adam woke to the sound of voices near his fence. He stepped outside and saw Karen with two men, both holding clipboards. They were from the HOA committee, their vests labeled inspection. Karen was pointing at his mailbox, talking loudly enough for neighbors to hear. We'll need this removed, it violates our standards. One of the men nodded obediently. Adam walked toward them, his voice steady. You're trespassing. Karen turned, her smile sharp. We're conducting a visual inspection, we have every right. Adam handed her a paper, freshly printed from the county office. You don't, he said firmly, this line right here. He pointed to the edge of the driveway. That's where your rules end. She took the paper, scanned it, her eyes narrowing. You think a piece of paper protects you? She hissed. You're still in this community whether you like it or not. Adam's eyes didn't waver. No, I live near your community, not in it. The neighbors who had gathered across the street began whispering, some filming quietly with their phones. Karen noticed and quickly walked away, muttering, we'll see what the board says. That night, Adam's phone buzzed again. Another message from Jim. You've really made her mad. She called an emergency HOA meeting tonight. Says she's bringing in county enforcement. Adam smiled to himself. Let her bring whoever she wants, he said under his breath. I've got proof. But as the night stretched on, the quiet of the valley grew tense again. Strange headlights passed by his house more than once, and once, just before midnight, someone knocked softly on his door. When he opened it, no one was there, only a note taped to the glass. This isn't over. Karen, meanwhile, sat in her living room surrounded by papers, her face pale under the lamp's glow. The old map spread in front of her like a war plan. She typed an email furiously, attaching the outdated map and sending it to the HOA attorney. Subject line, proof of jurisdiction expansion. She leaned back, a satisfied smile crossing her lips. He thinks he's safe, she whispered. But soon he'll wish he'd never moved here. Her cat brushed against her leg, the only witness to her growing madness. She looked toward Adam's glowing porch light through the blinds and muttered, enjoy your peace while it lasts. The next morning, Adam woke to find bright orange paint sprayed across his driveway. The words rule breaker scrawled in thick, ugly letters. He stood there quietly for a long time, then took out his phone and snapped photos from every angle. He didn't shout. He didn't call her name. He simply walked back inside, uploaded the pictures, and emailed them directly to the county sheriff's department with the subject line, harassment evidence, ongoing HOA dispute. He knew this wasn't random vandalism. It was desperation, the last gasp of a woman who couldn't stand losing control. Later that evening, he got a reply from the sheriff himself. "We're aware of the situation. Continue documenting everything. We'll be in touch." That night, thunder rolled over Maple Grove, the wind shaking the trees, rain hammering on roofs like warning drums. Karen watched from her window, the storm reflecting in her eyes. "He's making me look weak," she muttered, gripping her coffee cup so tightly it cracked. "He doesn't belong here." Lightning flashed, and in that split second, her reflection in the glass looked unfamiliar, angry, hollow, almost frightened. But the next moment she forced a smile, whispering to herself, "He'll learn. Soon enough." Across the street, Adam sat in the dark, listening to the rain, a quiet determination in his chest. He didn't know what Karen would try next, but he was ready, because the warning signs were no longer just whispers or letters. They were open threats, and he knew the line between peace and war in Maple Grove had already been crossed. The next morning began deceptively quiet, the kind of silence that hides something beneath it. Adam woke early, the air cool and heavy with the smell of wet soil from the storm that had passed overnight. He brewed his coffee, stepped out onto his porch, and stood there for a long moment, staring at the orange paint still faintly visible on his driveway despite the rain. It wasn't anger that he felt, but a cold, calm resolve across the road. Karen's blinds shifted, and for a brief second, their eyes met through the window. She smiled, not kindly, but the kind of smile that says, "I'm not done yet." Adam took another sip of coffee and muttered quietly, "Neither am I." By mid-morning, the valley was alive again, cars rolling down the street, kids waiting for the school bus, and neighbors pretending not to notice the tension thick in the air. But everyone knew what was coming. It wasn't a question of if, it was when. At exactly 10 o'clock, Adam heard voices outside, sharp, confident, and getting closer. When he stepped to his window, he saw 3 people standing on his driveway. Karen, 2 HOA board members behind her, and a man in a gray suit holding a clipboard. She was dressed perfectly as always, her posture straight, her chin tilted high. She looked like a queen marching into battle. "Mr. Cooper," she called loudly enough for the entire street to hear. "We need to have a word." Adam set his mug down, stepped outside, and leaned casually against his porch rail. "Morning," he said calmly. "What can I do for you?" Karen didn't smile. "We've received confirmation from our legal consultant that this property, while technically on the border, still falls within Maple Grove's jurisdiction," she declared. The man beside her nodded slightly but avoided eye contact. Adam tilted his head. "Your consultant?" he asked. "Would that be before or after the county confirmed the opposite?" Karen ignored the question, continuing louder. "You've built unauthorized structures, you've placed an unapproved mailbox, and your fence violates our standards. This can't continue." Adam crossed his arms, watching her theatrics unfold. He said slowly, "You are standing on my property right now, and I've already told you, your HOA doesn't apply here." She took a step closer, her heels sinking slightly into the wet soil. "We'll see about that," she said sharply. "If you continue to refuse compliance, the board will take action. We'll file for property seizure if we have to." Her words hung in the air like thunder. Neighbors across the street froze. Someone even gasped. Adam's expression didn't change, but his eyes darkened. "Property seizure?" he repeated softly. "That's a strong threat for land you don't own." She smirked. "You think a few papers and a map protect you? You're part of this community whether you admit it or not." Adam took a slow step forward, his voice calm but deep. "No, Karen. I bought this land because I wanted to live away from people like you." She blinked, her face twisting. "People like me?" she snapped. "You mean people who care about order?" He smiled faintly. "No, I mean people who mistake control for community." For a moment, the only sound was the soft hum of the wind through the trees. Then Karen's voice rose again, sharp and desperate. "You don't belong here, you're a disruption." She pointed toward his house, her voice trembling. "We will not allow you to destroy what we built here." Adam's tone stayed level. "You didn't build anything. You just made people afraid to live the way they want." By then, a few neighbors had stepped out of their homes, pretending to collect mail but clearly watching. Phones in hand, recording quietly. Karen noticed and turned red with fury, her voice rising. "Don't you all just stand there. This man is breaking the rules that protect your property values." But no one moved, no one spoke, they just stared. A few even lowered their eyes when Adam looked at them, and for the first time, Karen realized she was standing alone, her control slipping in real time. This conversation is over, Adam said finally, his tone steady. I'd like you to leave now. She laughed bitterly. You can't tell me to leave. This is still Maple Grove jurisdiction. He stepped closer, his voice lower now, colder. The next time you step past that property line without permission, it won't be a conversation. It'll be trespassing. Her jaw tightened. You wouldn't dare call the police. She hissed. Adam looked at her calmly and said, try me. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut. The man with the clipboard shifted nervously, whispering something to Karen. But she waved him off, her pride too big to back down. She turned sharply and stormed off, her heels splashing in the puddles left by last night's rain. But before she reached the road, Adam called out, Karen. She stopped, turning halfway. You might want to check your emails before you file anything, he said. The county's already updated their records. Her face went pale. What? She snapped. What do you mean? Adam smiled faintly. I sent them your old boundary map, the one you tried to use last time. They said they'd be reaching out to you soon. She froze, her mouth opening but no words coming out. Then without another sound, she turned and walked quickly back across the street. The two board members following behind like shadows, whispering nervously. The man in the grey suit lingered for a moment, then glanced at Adam and said quietly, for what it's worth, you're right about the boundary, then left without waiting for a reply. Adam stood there for a while, his heart steady, his face unreadable. Then he turned, picked up his coffee cup, and went back inside, closing the door softly behind him. But as he looked through the window, he could see Karen standing in her living room, pacing, gesturing wildly at her phone, her voice muffled but her anger visible. He could almost hear the words even through the glass, his mocking me, his making me look weak, I'll fix this. She was unraveling, and the line between control and obsession had finally snapped. That evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Adam received a call from the county office. The voice on the other end calm and professional. Mr. Cooper, just confirming, we've reviewed your documentation. Your property remains outside HOA limits. Any further action from them will be considered harassment. Adam smiled quietly. Thank you. He said, I'll keep that in mind. He hung up and looked outside once more, the street bathed in orange light, Karen's shadow moving behind her curtains like a restless ghost, and he knew, the fight wasn't over, but from now on, he wasn't the one on defense anymore. The next few days passed like calm before a storm, the kind of silence that tricks people into thinking the danger is over. Adam spent his mornings quietly fixing his porch, trimming the small hedge near his fence, and taking long walks by the line that separated his freedom from Karen's rules. But across the street, inside her perfect white house, Karen was spiraling. Her obsession had become something darker now. She barely slept, her phone filled with messages from the HOA board, most of them telling her to let it go. But she couldn't, she refused. She sat at her kitchen table surrounded by files, maps, and old documents spread like a battlefield, muttering to herself, he thinks he's won. No one defies me. Her reflection in the glass looked pale and exhausted. Her hands trembled as she wrote emails to local officials, each one angrier than the last, demanding that Adam's property be re-evaluated. She even reached out to a county assessor she knew personally, trying to convince him that there had been a boundary mistake. But her messages went unanswered. The silence from the authorities only fed her rage. By the third morning, a new kind of noise filled the neighborhood. Whispers, rumors spreading like cracks in ice. Karen had been telling everyone that Adam faked documents, that he cheated the system, and stole HOA land. A few gullible neighbors believed her at first, others kept quiet, tired of her constant drama. One afternoon, Adam was returning from the grocery store when he noticed a group of residents standing near his fence, talking in low voices. When they saw him, they fell silent. One of them, a nervous man named Brian, cleared his throat and said, Karen says your land was never approved by the county. Adam smiled slightly. Karen says a lot of things, he replied, setting his groceries down. But the county says otherwise. He took out his phone, opened an email, and showed them the official response from the county clerk. A stamped confirmation of his boundary line. The men looked at it, nodded awkwardly, and walked away. But from across the road, Karen stood by her mailbox watching, her jaw tight, her heart pounding. She could feel her control slipping further with every truth Adam spoke. That evening, as dusk painted the sky in shades of red and gold, Adam heard a loud metallic clang outside. He rushed to the porch and saw two men in reflective vests digging near the property line. A truck parked on the road with the HOA logo painted on its door. He walked over calmly and asked, "What are you doing?" One of them replied, "Installing a new boundary marker, HOA orders." Adam frowned. "This isn't your land." The man shrugged. "We just follow instructions. Across the street told us to." Adam's patience snapped for the first time. "Stop right now," he said firmly. "Unless you want the sheriff here." The men exchanged looks. One of them muttered, "I told her this was risky." They packed up their tools quickly and drove off, tires squealing. Adam stood there staring at the small metal stake. They had hammered into the ground, 3 feet inside his property line. The nerve of it made him almost laugh, but instead, he pulled it out slowly and tossed it aside, whispering, "You're losing it, Karen." Later that night, Adam sat by his desk going through the footage from his security cameras. He wasn't surprised to see what he found. Karen herself walking across the street at midnight, holding a flashlight, stopping near his fence, and planting another marker, her face tight with anger, her hands shaking. He paused the video, zooming in. Her expression was wild, desperate, like someone fighting ghosts. He saved the clip and backed it up twice. One copy sent straight to the sheriff's email. With a short note, "Trespassing caught on camera. Second offense." He closed his laptop and leaned back, exhaling slowly. "You're digging your own grave, Karen," he said softly. The next morning, the HOA board gathered outside her house for what she called an emergency meeting. But the mood was different this time, nervous, uneasy, tired. The members stood on her driveway, murmuring about legal risk, about county involvement, about the sheriff's warnings. Karen stood at the top of her steps holding a stack of papers, her voice sharp and defensive. "You're all overreacting. He's mocking us. Do you understand? He's mocking this entire community." One man sighed, "Karen, the county already confirmed his property's outside our boundary. If you keep pushing this, you'll drag the HOA into legal trouble." She glared at him. "I built this community," she snapped. "You think I'll let some outsider tear it apart?" Another member muttered, "You're tearing it apart yourself." And with that, half the group walked away, leaving her alone on the porch, her hands shaking, her face pale with rage. She slammed the door behind her, the echo loud enough for Adam to hear across the street. That afternoon, a patrol car slowly rolled through the neighborhood, stopping briefly near Karen's driveway. The officer stepped out, knocked on her door, and spoke with her for several minutes, though no one heard the full conversation. When the car drove away, she stood in her doorway staring blankly at nothing, the letter the officer handed her fluttering in her trembling hand. It was a formal warning notice for harassment and trespassing, the first of its kind in Maple Grove's history. She ripped it in half and threw it into the bushes, tears stinging her eyes. "They're all against me," she whispered, "even the law." Her pride had turned to paranoia, and paranoia quickly turned into rage. That night, heavy rain began to fall again, thunder rumbling low over the valley. Adam sat by his window, the flicker of lightning revealing shapes and shadows outside. Suddenly, he heard something, a car door slam, then footsteps splashing through the mud. He looked at the screen. His security feed showed a figure running toward his fence, holding something shiny in their hand. The next flash of lightning revealed her face. Karen, soaked, wild-eyed, clutching a hammer. She started hitting one of his fence posts, shouting something he couldn't hear over the rain. Adam stood up fast, opened the door, and shouted, "Karen, stop!" She froze, turning toward him, her hair plastered to her face, her voice breaking. "You think you're better than everyone. You think you can defy me." Adam stepped forward slowly, rain pounding down. "Go home, Karen," he said quietly. "This isn't going to end the way you think." For a second, she just stood there, breathing hard, her face twisting between rage and exhaustion. Then she dropped the hammer into the mud and stumbled back toward her house, sobbing, the storm swallowing her voice. When the morning came, the rain had washed away most of the mess, the footprints, the mud, the fallen hammer. But not the truth. Everyone in the neighborhood had heard her screaming. Everyone had seen the patrol car return later that night. And everyone knew the line had finally been crossed for good. The HOA's reign was cracking, and Karen Dalton's empire was falling apart one rule at a time. While across the street, Adam sipped his coffee on the porch, the sound of peace slowly returning to the valley, though he knew it wouldn't last, not yet. Because people like Karen never stop fighting until they destroy themselves completely. The next morning arrived heavy and gray, the kind of cloudy silence that felt like the world itself was holding its breath. Maple Grove had always been quiet, but today the silence had weight. People avoided eye contact. Whispers followed every car that passed, and Karen's name hung in the air like smoke after a fire. Adam didn't have to do anything. The truth was already spreading faster than she could stop it. The sheriff's car had been parked in front of her house until late the previous night, the flashing blue lights painting her white walls like warning beacons. By dawn, half the neighborhood had seen her yelling, half sobbing, standing in the rain, and by noon, someone had uploaded the footage. The video was short, just a few seconds from one of the neighbor's door cameras, but it told the whole story. Karen Dalton, the once untouchable HOA president, screaming and hitting Adam's fence with a hammer. Her voice raw with rage as Adam stood calmly in the rain, saying, "Go home, Karen." That single line became a legend overnight. By mid-morning, the neighborhood group chat exploded. Messages poured in like a flood. "Did you see it? Is that really her? She's lost it." Memes, screenshots, even short remixes appeared online. The whole valley was laughing. But behind the laughter was something else. Relief. People finally realizing that the fear she built her power on was gone. For years she'd ruled them with threats and fake fines. And now she was nothing but a story for amusement. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing, emails piling up, every HOA member demanding answers. The board president from the next county even wrote to her, calling her behavior unacceptable and disgraceful. But she couldn't focus on any of it. She just sat on her living room couch, her hair unbrushed, staring blankly at the video playing again and again on her tablet. The sound of her own voice shouting back at her like a ghost she couldn't silence. "You think you can defy me?" She flinched each time she heard it, her fingers trembling as she turned off the screen. Outside, she could hear the sound of Adam's lawnmower humming steadily, his normal calm work, somehow making her humiliation worse. By the time the HOA's emergency meeting started that evening, word had spread far beyond Maple Grove. Even the local news mentioned a neighborhood dispute gone viral. Reporters were parked at the main entrance of the community, hoping for a quote. Inside the meeting room, the atmosphere was pure chaos. 30 homeowners crowded into the narrow space, voices overlapping, faces red with anger. "She embarrassed us all," one man shouted. "You said he was the problem, but it's been you all along." Another woman snapped. "You forged those notices, didn't you?" Karen stood at the front, trying to speak over them, her voice breaking. "I did what was necessary to protect this community." But no one listened anymore. Paul, the vice president, stood and slammed a folder on the table. "These are the county maps, Karen," he said loudly. "They prove his house isn't under us. You lied." Gasps filled the room. Someone muttered, "This is harassment." Another said, "We could all get sued." Paul turned toward the crowd. "We're voting tonight," he announced. "Either we dissolve this HOA, or we remove her before the state does it for us." Karen's face went pale, her lips trembling. "You can't do this to me," she shouted. "I built Maple Grove. Without me, there would be no community." But the room erupted in noise, people shouting "enough" and "step down," until finally, she froze, realizing the power she'd clung to for years had vanished in a single evening. Paul took a deep breath. All in favor of removing Karen Dalton from her position effective immediately. Almost every hand went up. The sound of rustling papers and murmurs filled the air. Karen's eyes darted across the faces. People who once feared her now looking at her with pity or disgust. She turned away, tears blurring her vision. "You're making a mistake," she said weakly. "Here's the real problem. Not me." But no one replied. Paul just said quietly, "It's over, Karen." Outside, Adam sat on his porch, the sky glowing orange as the sun dipped low behind the hills. He could hear the faint sound of voices from the meeting hall, the rise and fall of angry words carried by the wind. He didn't need to know the details. He already knew how it would end. He leaned back in his chair, sipping coffee, the faint hum of crickets filling the evening air. The storm had broken, but its aftermath still echoed through the valley. A few minutes later, the door of the meeting hall burst open. Karen walked out fast, her steps uneven, her face streaked with tears, clutching a stack of papers to her chest. Paul followed her out but didn't speak. She stopped at the end of the path and looked across the road toward Adam's house, the porch light glowing softly. He was sitting there, calm, still, watching her without a word. Their eyes met across the street. Years of arrogance and resistance shrinking down to a single hollow stare. She wanted to scream, to blame him, to call him the villain, but she couldn't, because deep down she finally understood. He never did anything wrong. All she had fought for was control. And all it brought her was ruin. She dropped the papers, turned, and walked away, her figure vanishing into the darkness as whispers spread behind her. She's done, someone said quietly, it's really over. The next morning, a letter from the county arrived at every home in Maple Grove, confirming an official audit into HOA management and citing potential legal action against the board. The same morning, Karen's car was gone from her driveway, her blinds drawn, her house empty. She had vanished without a word. Paul was named acting president until further notice. Though everyone knew the HOA's days were numbered, and for the first time in years, the neighborhood felt free. No more letters, no threats, no fines, only silence and sunlight. Adam's life returned to the peace he'd always wanted. But he still kept his cameras up, not out of fear, but as a quiet reminder of how close peace can come to war. That afternoon, he received an email from the county sheriff's office confirming that Karen had been issued a restraining order preventing her from contacting or approaching him again. He smiled softly, leaning back in his chair, the hum of the wind gentle against the trees. Across the street, her house stood still and empty. The once proud fortress of rules now nothing but wood and glass and silence. That evening, the neighbors gathered near the lake at the end of the road, a small group with food, laughter, and conversation. Something they hadn't done in years. Someone raised a glass and said, "To the man who reminded us that freedom still exists." Adam shook his head, smiling. "I didn't remind anyone," he said quietly. "I just stopped letting fear do the talking." The crowd fell silent for a moment, then laughed and clapped, the sound echoing softly under the fading light. As the night deepened, the reflection of streetlights danced across the calm water, and for the first time, Maple Grove looked alive again, truly alive, not perfect, not controlled, just human. The days that followed were strangely quiet in Maple Grove, but beneath the calm, something dark was brewing again. Karen Dalton had vanished from her spotless white house, the blinds closed, the driveway empty, but her mind had not gone still. She was like a storm pushed underground, silent for now, waiting to explode. The community tried to move on. The HOA was under review. New board elections were being planned, and the sheriff had confirmed that a restraining order now prevented Karen from contacting Adam. But peace felt fragile, like glass stretched too thin. Everyone wondered if she would return, and deep down, Adam knew she wasn't finished. People like Karen never leave. Quietly, they need a stage, even if it's burning beneath them. So he kept his cameras running, his lights on, his instincts awake, because something in his gut told him that this wasn't over yet. One evening, about a week after her removal, Adam noticed headlights moving slowly past his property. Not stopping, just circling. The same car coming by 3, 4, 5 times before disappearing into the dark. He recognized the shape. The same silver sedan Karen had driven for years. The next morning, he called the sheriff and reported it. But there wasn't much they could do unless she broke the order. Still, the presence of that car unsettled the neighborhood. People whispered about it at the mailboxes. "She's watching us," one woman said. "I saw her at the gas station. She looked different," another added. Her eyes were wild. And that was true. Karen wasn't the same anymore. The power she had once wrapped herself in like armor was gone. And without it, she looked smaller, hollow, like someone haunted by their own reflection. She was living out of her car now, sleeping near the edge of town, replaying every moment of her downfall in her head, each time twisting it more until, in her mind, she was the victim and Adam was the villain who destroyed her life. One night, sitting in the dark behind the wheel, she whispered to herself, "He took everything from me, everything I built." Her eyes cold, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tight her knuckles went white. "He'll regret it." That night, while the valley slept, she drove back into Maple Grove, the streets empty, the air heavy with fog. She parked down the road from Adam's house and sat there for a long time, staring through the windshield, the faint glow of his porch light flickering through the mist. In her mind, she could hear the laughter from the HOA meeting, the whispers, the looks of pity, the news headlines calling her the HOA president who lost it. Rage burned through her veins like fire. She opened her door, stepped out, her heels clicking softly on the wet pavement. In her hand, she held a small metal can, gasoline. She moved quietly toward the fence, whispering, "You ruined me, let's see how you like it." But she didn't notice the small red light blinking from the corner of Adam's porch. The camera recording every move she made. She poured a thin line of gas along the edge of the fence, her hand trembling, lightning flashing faintly overhead. She struck a match, her reflection dancing in the orange glow for a brief second, and then she froze, a voice cutting through the quiet, calm and deep, "Don't do it, Karen." Adam stood at the porch steps, his face half-lit by the porch light, his eyes steady, his voice calm like stone. Karen turned, her hand shaking, the flame flickering dangerously close to her fingers. "You took everything from me?" she screamed, her voice breaking. "You humiliated me in front of everyone." Adam didn't move. "No," he said softly. "You did that yourself." She laughed bitterly. "You think you're better than me? You think people actually care about you?" Her eyes were wet, her voice cracked. "You don't belong here. None of this belongs to you." Adam stepped closer, rain beginning to fall again. Soft at first, then heavier. He looked at her and said, "Neither does control, Karen. That's what you never understood." She stared at him, her chest rising and falling, her hand lowering slightly, the match hissing as a drop of rain hit it and went out. For a long moment, she just stood there, shaking, broken between rage and regret. Then she dropped the can, backed away slowly, and whispered, "You ruined my life." Adam didn't answer, he just pointed quietly at the blinking red light above his porch. Her eyes followed, and when she saw it, her expression changed. Fear, real fear. For the first time in years, she realized the camera had captured everything. She turned and ran, slipping in the mud, scrambling back to her car as thunder rolled overhead. By morning, the police were at her door. She hadn't gone far. The footage made everything undeniable. The gas can, the match, the trespass. She was arrested quietly, her face pale, her hair wet, her voice barely a whisper. "He did this to me," she said as they placed her in the back seat. But no one listened. No one believed her anymore. The entire neighborhood stood behind their windows watching, some shaking their heads, others just silent. She was no longer the queen of Maple Grove. She was the ghost of what power becomes when it goes rotten. As the car drove away, Adam watched from his porch, his hands in his pockets, his expression calm but heavy. He didn't smile, he didn't celebrate. Because there was nothing to celebrate in watching someone destroy themselves. He simply whispered, "It's over." But it wasn't quite over yet. A few days later, a local news van showed up at the edge of Maple Grove, the reporter's voice carrying through the quiet streets as they recorded a segment titled "The HOA President Who Went Too Far." The story of Karen Dalton became a warning, not just for their valley, but for communities across the county. It began as a small property dispute, the reporter said, and ended in chaos. Adam stayed inside, not wanting to be on camera, but his name still made the report. A homeowner who simply wanted peace. The voiceover said, stood firm against corruption. That night, as the broadcast played on TV screens all over town, Karen sat alone in a county holding cell, her eyes hollow, staring at the flickering image of herself screaming on the news. The sound of rain outside the small window the only thing left that felt real. Across the street, the neighborhood had already started to move on, kids playing in the yards again, people chatting on sidewalks, laughter slowly replacing fear. Adam stepped out onto his porch, the air clean after the storm. He looked across at Karen's empty house and felt a strange sadness, not pity. Just the quiet realization that peace always has a price. Sometimes it's just standing your ground. Sometimes it's watching someone else lose theirs. He turned off the porch light, whispered softly, "Goodbye, Karen," and went inside, closing the door on a story that had burned too long, but finally, at last, had gone dark. Weeks passed since that stormy night, and Maple Grove began to change in quiet, unexpected ways. The air felt lighter, the streets cleaner not because of rules, but because people finally cared again. The fear that once lived behind every curtain had vanished, replaced by something gentler, laughter, freedom. The sound of life returning after too long under control. The HOA office stood empty, its glass door taped with a notice from the county, organization under review, operations suspended. The sign fluttered in the morning breeze like a flag of surrender. Neighbors walked their dogs without worrying about approved leash lengths. Children rode their bikes wherever they pleased, and nobody whispered about violations anymore. It felt almost unreal, like a place reborn. And at the heart of it all sat Adam Cooper, the man who had done nothing but stand his ground. He had become a quiet symbol in Maple Grove, not a hero by his own choosing, but the man who reminded everyone what real ownership meant. Most mornings he sat on his porch with a cup of coffee, watching the sunrise stretch over the valley. His fence still standing strong, the line still clear. Not 1 inch changed. Across the street, Karen's old house remained empty, the curtains drawn, her flowerbeds overgrown, and her name spoken only in low voices, more as a caution than a memory. Remember. When she ran things, one neighbor would say, "Hard to believe it was like that once." Another would reply, shaking their head, "Never again." The house was listed for sale, but no one wanted it, as if it carried the ghost of every rule she forced, every threat she made. Even the realtor whispered that it felt cursed. One morning, a county truck arrived and quietly removed the old HOA sign from the community entrance. The workers tossed it into the back of the truck, the word authority on it scratched and faded. As it disappeared down the road, people gathered outside their homes, some clapping softly, some just watching in silence. It felt like an ending, the kind of moment where you could almost hear a sigh from the earth itself, as if the valley had finally exhaled after years of holding its breath. That evening, Adam was invited to a small gathering by the lake, a neighborhood barbecue organized not by rules or committees, but by people just wanting to enjoy being neighbors. He hesitated at first, not one for crowds, but something inside told him to go. When he arrived, the scene felt unreal, kids laughing, lights hanging from trees. Music soft and warm, people smiling genuinely for the first time in years. When they saw him, the laughter quieted for a moment, then someone raised a glass. "To Adam," they said. "The man who reminded us what freedom feels like." Cheers erupted, not loud or rowdy, just honest, heartfelt. Adam smiled, a little embarrassed. "I didn't do anything," he said humbly. "I just wanted to live in peace." An older man laughed. "And in doing that, you gave us back ours." As night settled over the lake, the reflection of the lights danced across the water, and for the first time in a long time, there was no fear of who was watching, no whisper of who might complain, only the sound of peace, real peace, the kind that doesn't come from rules, but from respect. Adam stood by the water's edge, looking across at the faint outline of the houses, the trees, and the sky. He thought about Karen, not with anger, not even with pity, but with quiet understanding. She had built her world on control, and when that crumbled, she had nothing left. He whispered softly, "I hope she finds peace too." Then turned back toward the firelight, the sound of laughter behind him. Later that night, he sat on his porch again, the air cool, the stars sharp and bright above the valley. Everything felt still, calm, exactly as it should. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. The same county map he'd shown her that first day, the red line still visible where freedom began. He smiled faintly and tucked it back away, a quiet reminder that some battles aren't fought with anger, but with patience. Behind him, his porch light glowed softly, the same light that once caught Karen trespassing, now shining like a symbol of quiet victory. He looked up at the night sky and said under his breath, "We're finally home." And the breeze that passed through the valley carried his words softly across the empty street, past the quiet houses, past the lake, like a whisper of closure that the whole neighborhood could feel. By morning, Maple Grove was alive again, the sound of sprinklers, birds, laughter, the music of ordinary life. No one talked about fines or violations, no one mentioned rules, just plans for gardens, family dinners, and summer days. And in that ordinary beauty lay the truth that Karen could never understand. That real order isn't forced, it's chosen. The line she tried to erase had become a lesson for everyone, and though her name had faded, the story stayed, told to new neighbors like a legend, the man who bought a home just beyond the line, and taught an entire community where freedom truly begins.